Today we're going to talk about life on Earth and how it's all connected. Life on Earth can be divided up into lots of smaller areas, each having a group of animals and plants in. Each of these areas is known as an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be as small as a lake or as large as a tropical rainforest. If all the animals and plants in one area are connected to each other, this area can be called an ecosystem. How much life each ecosystem has depends on where it is in the world and what the climate is there. Places with lots of sun and rain often have lots of life, like in a rainforest. But places that are cold and with no rain often have little life, like at the poles. The amount of life in one area is called the biodiversity. Deserts have a very low biodiversity, and rainforests have a very high biodiversity. In any ecosystem, the energy originally comes from the sun. The sun gives off light energy known as photons. When these hit the Earth, they're used by plants. Plants use something called photosynthesis to take the light from the sun and carbon from the air. They use these to create energy for themselves and to grow. Pretty much all life on Earth depends on photosynthesis by plants. This is where almost all the energy comes from on Earth. This is the same for humans too. Apart from solar energy, where we get energy directly from the sun, there's also all the other things we use for energy, like coal and oil, which are just dead animals and plants. Photosynthesis by plants really makes the rest of life on Earth possible. After plants take energy from the sun and use it to grow, they can be eaten by animals. Animals that eat plants are called herbivores, and they include things like cows and rabbits. They can then be eaten by other animals, called carnivores. Carnivores eat meat, and they include things like lions, tigers, and sharks. This process of energy moving from a plant to a herbivore to a carnivore is called a food chain. It is the route energy takes through the ecosystem. However, this is quite a basic way of looking at it. In the real world, it isn't as simple as just one food chain. Animals eat lots of different things, and they can be eaten by lots of different animals. In reality, it's more like a food web than a food chain. This idea of a food web was actually first seen in the books of Darwin. He talked about a web of life. A food chain doesn't go on forever. Eventually the energy runs out. Of all the energy that a plant gets from the sun, only a certain percentage passes to the next stage in the food chain. The plant has to use some of the energy itself to grow. Once the plant is eaten by the herbivore, the same thing happens again. Some of the energy is used by the animal for growing and moving around. The next stage, the carnivore, therefore only gets a certain percentage of the energy that the herbivore got originally. This process continues along the food chain until all the energy is used up. This is why life looks like a pyramid. There are lots and lots of plants, quite a lot of herbivores, but then fewer carnivores. When you reach the top of the pyramid, or the end of the food chain, there's only a small number of big predators, big carnivores. There's usually only a maximum of 4 or 5 levels in a food chain. This is why predators like tigers are quite rare compared to plants and herbivores. After the animals and plants die, they decompose. They're broken down by bacteria, and their nutrients go back to the soil. This nutrient cycle is another very important part of an ecosystem. Apart from the energy from the sun, other things are passed along the food chain too. The most important of these things are elements like carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Some animals can get these from the environment, but most of the time they get them from eating other animals. The two most famous cycles in nature are the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. Ecosystems are not constant and they change greatly over time. This can be due to the evolution of the plants and animals within the ecosystem, or a much larger change to the whole ecosystem itself. This can happen because of climate change or with something like what happened to the dinosaurs, a meteorite hitting the Earth. Changes in the environment and ecosystems can cause extinctions. In fact, scientists think that more than 99% of all the animal and plant species that have ever lived are now extinct. Moreover, because everything in an ecosystem is connected, if one animal or plant goes extinct, it can affect many others.